So let's talk about Darwin's theory of evolution. Charles Darwin was a world traveler who collected organisms. He traveled to the Galapagos Islands where he studied turtles and finches. He developed his theory of evolution by natural selection as an explanation for adaptation and speciation. He observed that there was a wide range of diversity among organisms. On the Galapagos Islands, the species seemed to be adapted to a specific environment. The changing environment selects specific genetic phenotypes. The organisms with favorable adaptations lived to survive, to reproduce, and then they were able to pass on their traits. And a change in favored alleles led to changes in the species over time. So this is the Galapagos Islands. When we talk about the changing environments select specific genetic phenotypes, look at Darwin's finches. Notice how all of his finches have a different beak. That's because they were adapted. Those beaks were adapted for the type of island that they lived on. So if the island had a lot of fruits and buds, the finches on that particular island had a beak like this that was hard enough to actually get to the fruit or to the meat of the fruit and the buds. If the island had a lot of seeds on it, the bird's beak looked like this so that it could crack open those seeds. So it was adapted for that particular island. So evolution is a theory just like gravity. It's a well-supported explanation of phenomena that has occurred in the natural world. And in science, theories are statements of models that have been tested and confirmed many times. We do not express doubt in theories, but they are not absolute either. So they can be changed as new evidence is found. So what is the evidence for evolution? We don't actually say, scientists don't actually say that evolution is real. We actually have evidence to prove it. And if you get a chance, I want you to look at the video on the evidence for evolution. So the fossil record is a type of evidence for evolution. It's a collection that provides evidence about the history of life's development. We can look at the fossil record via radioactive evidence. If it's absolute, it will destroy the evidence. So we try not to use absolute evidence, but we can use relative dating. And that's simply comparing where one species is in comparison to another. The lower of the two species, of course, would probably be the oldest. And we have a geological time scale that shows mass extinctions. Molecular evidence is used to compare DNA and amino acid sequences. We use DNA fingerprinting, we use cladograms, we use phylogenetic trees. Anatomical evidence is the similar structures that can show how species are related. We use homologous structures, we use vestigial structures, and lastly, we have embryology. That's similarities in early development. So homologous structures are when the species have the same structure, but it's used for different purposes, like the arm of a human, the leg of a horse, the leg of a cat, the wing of a bat. They all have the same anatomical structure: one bone, two bones, wrist, hand, and finger bones. It's the same one. It's the same structure, but we use it for different purposes. Embryology, notice how all the embryos look really similar to each other. It's hard to tell embryos apart until they start growing bigger or getting bigger, older. Vestigial structures are structures which remain in organisms, but they don't have an obvious function. Why do snakes have leg bones? Why do whales have leg bones? They don't walk. Those are vestigial structures. So natural selection is survival of the fittest. It's the process of individuals that are better adapted to their environment and are more likely to survive and reproduce. Survival of the fittest and natural selection is the same thing. Factors that affect natural selection are overproduction. That's when a species produces more offspring than can possibly survive. Fish can produce up to 10,000 eggs. Why? It's overproduction. Variation. Those are the differences between individuals due to mutations and genetic recombination. And of course, competition. Resources are limited, so species must be able to compete to survive. Evidence of a population. Evolution is a change in allele frequency in a population over time. Sources of genetic variation. Where do these traits come from? They come from mutations, they come from genetic recombination. Populations, not individual organisms, evolve over time. A gene pool are all of the genes or alleles that are present in a population. Changes in our gene pool are driven by natural selection. So natural selection are the traits that help an organism survive in a particular environment. They are selected in natural selection. Over time, natural selection results in changes in the inherited characteristics of a population. These changes increase a species' ability to survive. So you guys heard of the Industrial Revolution, right? So the black-peppered moth, during the Industrial Revolution, you know how coal and soot and all of that was coming out of the factories, the trees became really dark. So the birds couldn't see the black-peppered moth, but they could see the white-peppered moth. So the black-peppered moth was selected. It survived because the darkness of the trees hid that it was dark also. So the birds ate the light trees. So let's talk about natural selection in a nutshell. Excuse me. So these birds, they like the green beetles. But in its population of beetles, there's different traits for color. There's brown beetles and there's green beetles. So the birds only eat the green beetles. So because they're only eating the green beetles, the brown beetles are starting to flourish. Their population is starting to flourish. And generations later, the green beetles have been selected against, and the brown beetles have flourished. So that's natural selection in a nutshell.